I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent. And all will be lost. All will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. And dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
Welcome, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I am Clint Richardson, and it is the 18th of March, 2014. Welcome to the show. No guest today, so I'm going to continue on where I left off on Friday, which was to read the Lieber Code, because I still say that this is the most important concept to understanding our actual disposition within this nation. And again, we're not talking about status. We're not talking about what you've done in the legal realm. We're not talking about all the stuff we talk about, being Christian or non-Christian, being lawful or unlawful, legal or non-legal. You see, under a military occupation, none of that actually matters to the people doing the occupation. And unfortunately, that, again, is your sons and daughters, your fathers, your husbands and family, all in the military, which, once again, is so important. It's so important to get rid of this whole Oath Keepers nonsense, to actually read the oath and to tell them, no, you should not keep the oath because, hey, soldier, your oath says that you're going to obey the orders of the president and that you're going to obey the orders of your higher-up officers. Okay, against the American people, not for. They're protecting government. And this needs to get out, because what government is the point of actually reading this whole Lieber Code and how it's been put into the U.S. Code and codified in Title 50 and other places. Excuse me. Oh, got a little frog. Excuse me. So, boy, what a mess it is. I'd like to start today because we talked about the first 5 or 6 articles in the Lieber Code. Remember, there's articles in all of the different organic documents as well. The Constitution has articles, the Articles of Confederation. It's just articles. Article actually has a specific meaning that maybe I'll get to later. But I'd like to start off by just reading what happened April 15th, 1861. When basically the first, there was a proclamation calling the militia and convening Congress, April 15th, 1861, by the President of the United States. A proclamation. And it says, whereas the laws of the United States have been for some time past and now are opposed, and the execution thereof obstructed in the states of South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas by combinations too powerful to be suppressed by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings or by the powers vested in the marshals by law. Now, therefore, I, Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, not America, the President of the United States, he's acting as the sort of second, the central government as opposed to the 50 states. In other words, Washington, D.C. Now, therefore, I, Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, in virtue of the power in me vested by the Constitution and the laws, very important, and the laws, have thought fit to call forth and hereby to call forth the militia of the several states of the Union to the aggregate number of 75,000 in order to suppress said combinations. He's referring, of course, to those southern states, as we call them, seceding from the Union. And, of course, seceding means that they are taking over the so-called land of the United States, the territory of the United States, and claiming it their own. So it's actually, secession is actually, can be an act of attrition or war. So in order to suppress said combinations and to cause the laws to be duly executed. Well, as we've discussed, what is law? Law is nothing but force, people. That's it. No law by man can be executed in any other way than by volunteerism, which is what we're doing today. And if we don't agree then that's where the force comes in. But ultimately, all law requires force. It's an unfortunate reality. Yep, sorry. No matter how you look at it, a law does no good. A judge has no authority without his executive, the sheriff, and his police force to carry forth his opinions. A congressman has no authority to do anything. A president has no authority without an army. No congressional bill, no act, no Patriot Act has any authority whatsoever unless you and me, our children, our fathers, our cousins, carry it out against us. That's the truth. That is such an obvious, self-evident truth that I'm not even going to entertain the concept that there is an argument against that, nor will I entertain the concept that I'm a free man and therefore I'm immune to military rule and martial law. And we're going to prove that in a minute. So I say, the whole purpose of this is to say that you cannot ignore the problem. The problem doesn't go away because you claim a different status or a non-status. The problem still exists, so we cannot just bury our heads in the sand, no matter what we become. And this is why, the mistake is to think that the remedy of, as we talk with Daniel on Wednesdays, tomorrow, in fact, that the Christ figure was a pacifist. No, I'm sorry, but I can't agree with that concept. It's just you cannot be a pacifist. For instance, if someone is breaking the natural law and harming you must enforce the natural law. There has to be. That is what law boils down to. No matter how many people respect the law, there will always be those who don't, and you have to be able to defend. Unfortunately, this has been absolutely just taken way out of hand with what we have now. He goes on to say that to suppress said combinations to cause the laws to be duly executed. All right, I mean that's force. That's violent force. The details for this object will be immediately communicated to the state authorities through the War Department. They call it what do they call it today? The Peace Department? No, what is it? The Defense Department. That's right. It used to be the War Department. Now they've used word magic and trickery to call it the Defense Department. You look at the Department of Defense, it's pretty shocking, really. And, of course, where the Department of Defense is now all across the world, I'm not sure how that's defense, because in reality it's the Department of War. He says, I appeal to all loyal citizens to favor, facilitate, and aid this effort to maintain the honor and integrity and the existence of our national union and the perpetuity of popular government. Popular government. In other words, the opinion of the courts, that is popular opinion. And to redress wrongs already long endured. We'll be back, folks. Stay tuned.
First of all, let me take just a moment to thank you for allowing me back into your homes. If this is your first time with us, let me extend a personal invitation. Let's build a happy little cloud. Let's build some happy little trees. There are no limits here. You start out by believing here. This is your world. You're the creator. Find freedom on this canvas. Believe that you can do it. Because you can do it. Relax. Let it flow. Think like water. Relax. Let it flow. You can go on and on and on.
All right, folks. Welcome back.
We just had happy accidents.
Good times. We're talking about good old President Lincoln. Good old. What am I saying? That's just silly. He goes on in his proclamation, because what he's really doing is giving a reason, a proclamation, a declaration, basically, to declare that the Congress must meet in an emergency session. So he says, he demands that the persons composing the combinations aforesaid, which is the southern states developing their own union, disperse and retire peacefully to their respective abodes within 20 days of this date. Deeming that the present condition of public affairs present an extraordinary occasion, I do, as president, hereby, in virtue of the power in me vested by the Constitution, convene both houses of Congress. Senators and representatives are therefore summoned to assemble, ironically, at noon o'clock on Thursday, the 4th of July, or the 4th day of July. So when you're celebrating the 4th of July next time, remember that that was actually the day that the United States declared war on all of you and put you under martial law. That was the day that Congress got together and basically said, yeah, let's go attack and put martial law down and never let it go. That's really what the 4th day of July should be celebrated as. It should be a day of infamy. Next, then, there to consider and determine on the 4th day of July such measures as, in their wisdom, the public safety and interest may demand. It's interesting because he says, I deem it proper to say that the first service assigned to the forces hereby called forth will probably be to repossess the forts, places, and property which have been seized from the Union. Again, you see, this was a seizure. This is secession. This means that the states that seceded were seizing all of the property that the Union believed belonged to them. So to the Union, they were just taking back their supposed property, even though it was completely unlawful, and secession was part of the deal. And in every event, the utmost care will be observed consistently with the objects aforesaid to avoid any devastation, any destruction of, or interfere with property, or any disturbance of peaceful citizens, any part of the country. In other words, we will mind the Lieber Code, or the rules of war. We'll try not to harm citizens, although that's perfectly fine. Peaceful citizens, they're just collateral like in any other country, just like you are today. Now, this led, eventually, to Executive Order number 1, the first executive order ever published that I understand it. There might have been other things before this, but this was the first war measure, basically, that I can comprehend. You might go back all the way to Washington and say that was, but in our modern times, because this was the first time that the Congress was divided. In other words, when he called Congress, he called all of Congress. But guess what? The Congress didn't convene lawfully because the southern states no longer participated. Therefore, at that moment, the Union was bust. The only way that Lincoln could have power was to declare that this was not a new nation, and could not recognize the rights of an international nation, the law of nations, and to go in and get their territories back. Again, we read from the government website that they did not want to recognize. They never recognized the Confederate States of America as a nation. If they would have done so, they'd have been under all the rules of war. in the actual fighting. So, Executive Order number 1, January 22nd. So 6 months later. The purpose, 1862, the purpose of this war is to attack, pursue, and destroy a rebellious enemy and to deliver the country from danger menaced by traitors. So escaping the tyranny of the central government made them traitors and a rebellious army. All they wanted to do was be left alone. It wasn't them who were attacking. It was the United States attacking the Confederacy. He goes on, alacrity, daring, courageous spirit, and patriotic zeal on all occasions and under every circumstance are expected from the Army of the United States. In the prompt and spirited movements and daring battle of Mill Springs, the nation will realize its hopes, and the people of the United States will rejoice to honor every soldier and officer who proves his courage by charging with the bayonet and storming entrenchments or in the blaze of the enemy fire. It's very romantic, but of course we're talking about charging and bayoneting and shooting our family members. We can't really forget that. And this is the same type of propaganda, the same type of, patriotism that's used today to go halfway across the world and kill people that have nothing to do with us. Okay, same thing. Same exact thing. President's General War Order number 1. By order of the President, Edwin M. Stanton. All right. Then you had Executive Order, General War Order number 1. Ordered the 22nd day of February, 1962. Be the day for a general movement of the land and naval forces of the United States against the insurgent forces. Oh, isn't that so ironic? Because what do we call the insurgents? What do we call the men, women, and children who defend their country against our soldiers, the soldiers of Israel and the soldiers of the UK? What do we call those poor people who the CIA ran guns to so that they could fight back? What do we call them in their own country, in their own states? As we attack them, just like in the Civil War, they called them insurgent forces. People who were fighting to protect their homes and their families from a bunch of useful idiots who wanted to continue the continuity of government. The military, basically. That especially the Army at and about Fortress Monroe, the Army of the Potomac, the Army of Western Virginia, and a naval force in the Gulf of Mexico will be ready to move on that day. That all other forces, both land and naval, with their respective commanders, obey existing orders for the time and be ready to obey additional orders when duly given. There's your oath again. You see the oath to the president. It's not to protect the people. If they were protecting the people, they'd be protecting their cousins, their brothers and sisters who are on the other side of the border. They weren't enemies. It goes on that the heads of departments, and especially the secretaries of war and of the Navy, with all of their subordinates and the general-in-chief, with all other commanders and subordinates of land and naval forces, will severally be held to their strict, be held to their strict and full responsibilities for prompt execution of this order. Well, there you have the makings, the trappings of the Civil War. Now, as we discussed in several of the articles of the Lieber Code on Friday, what happened then was basically just carried over by every president since. We've been in the same martial law, the same emergency powers, the state of necessity. All right, folks, we'll be back.
Watching
right, folks, welcome back. So we're reading Executive Order number 1. Well, let's go way forward in the future and let's discuss the executive order that has to do with terrorists. They call them insurgents back then, and they created the word terrorism. And, of course, what do we get? Well, 9 years after 9/11, President Obama, after Bush left office, President Obama declared a continuation of Bush's original national emergency declaration, which, of course, lends, you declare the emergency in order to gain certain emergency powers, which you list, and we call that the Patriot Act and other things, because out of necessity, the Patriot Act is necessary to make sure that we understand that we're all terrorists or potential terrorists, potential enemies of the state, and we are all domestic people. And, of course, the military is pledged to protect government against domestic people, foreign and domestic. Doesn't matter. The WhiteHouse.gov federal website, letter from the president on the continuation of the national emergency with respect to certain terrorist attacks, September 10th, 2010. Dear Madam Speaker, Section 202D of the National Emergency Act, 50 U.S. Code 1622D, which, of course, has to do with the Lieber Code, provides for the automatic termination of a national emergency unless, prior to the anniversary date of this declaration, the President publishes in the Federal Register and transmits to the Congress a notice stating that the emergency is to continue in effect beyond the anniversary date. Well, every year, each president, they sign a letter that someone else writes saying we're going to go ahead and declare all of these emergency declarations because that's the only way that a president can continue to have executive orders. If there's no emergency, there's no justification for necessity, which necessity knows no law, and therefore there's no justification for the president to dictate the law as a dictator. Okay, the president publishes in the Federal Register and transmits. The president publishes in the Federal Register and transmits to the Congress a notice stating that the emergency is to continue in effect beyond the anniversary date of 1 year. Consistent with this provision, I have sent to the Federal Register the enclosed notice stating that the emergency declared with respect to terrorist attacks on the United States of September 11th, 2001, is to continue in effect for an additional year. Goes on to say, Obama does, the terrorist threat that led to the declaration of September 14th, 2001, of a national emergency continues. For this reason, I have determined that it is necessary to continue in effect after September 14th, 2010, the national emergency with respect to the terrorist threat. Obama, in one of his speeches, really hit this home with, in regards to what this fictitious international and national foe with no actual name actually is. Because remember, a declaration of emergency is the same as a declaration of war, except with an emergency, you're declaring war on a concept, not an actual place or thing. You're actually declaring war on terrorism, which has no nation, it has no home, it has nothing. It's not real. It has to be bestowed upon you. And, of course, he reserves the right to call you a terrorist. So what does he say? He says, our nation is at war against a far-reaching network of violence and hatred. That's it. That's your war. We have a war against violence and hatred, apparently. That's terrorism. 2011, September 11th, 2011. How ironic that he does it on September 11th, 2011. He says the terrorist threat that led to the declaration on September 14th, 2001 of a national emergency continues. For this reason, I've determined that it is necessary to continue in effect after September 14th, 2012, the national emergency with respect to the terrorist threat. Yeah. Now, why is this important? Well, let's read from the joint statement from Senators Frank Church and Charles McMathias, one a Democrat, one a Republican. This is from September 30th, 1973, a grave warning of things that have already come to pass and are about to get much worse because we're allowing it to happen. Actually, Congress has not stopped this. Here's what they said. Again, Frank Church, Charles McMathias. It says, quote, the president has the power to seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, call reserve forces amounting 2.5 million men to duty, institute martial law, seize and control all means of transportation, regulate all private enterprise, restrict travel, and in a plethora of particular ways control the lives of all Americans. Most of these laws remain in a potential source of virtually unlimited power for a president should he choose to activate them. In other words, the power is there. He can activate them at any time, or he should say he can activate any of those declarations, any of those statutes, should say executive orders, anytime he wants to. Anytime. Okay? Again, they say, on congressional record, most of these laws remain a potential source of virtually unlimited power for a president should he choose to activate them. What does that spell, folks? That spells a dictator. He's already dictated the law, or I should say the possibility of doing all the things we just read, seizing commodities and all that stuff. So at any time, it is possible that some future president, here's what they say in congressional record. I mean, you want to know how defunct and corrupt your Congress is. This is what they know. This is what they allow every day. He says, Church and McMathias, 1973, September 30th, congressional record. It is possible that some future president could exercise this vast authority in an attempt to place the United States under authoritarian rule. It's already under authoritarian rule. It's just that some of those authoritarian rules have not been activated. Activate being the term they use. While the danger of a dictatorship, continuing with the quote, while the danger of a dictatorship arising through legal means may seem remote to us today, and that was in 1973, recent history records Hitler seizing control through the use of the emergency powers provisions contained in the laws of the Weimar Republic. Same exact scenario, same exact thing. Now, oh no, you played the Hitler card. No, I didn't. I'm reading from the joint statements of Senators Frank Church and Charles McMathias, September 30th, 1973. They are worried that what Hitler did to the German Republic, which was to invoke Article 48, same exact thing as the War Powers Act, same thing our president is doing now. Hitler seized control through the use of the emergency powers provisions. Same exact thing. They're warning you not so much what Hitler did, but what our president can do. Seize commodities. Organize and control the means of production. Assign military forces abroad. Call reserve forces amounting to 2.5 million men to duty. Institute martial law. Seize and control all means of transportation. Regulate all private enterprise. Restrict travel and in a plethora of particular ways control the lives of all Americans. That's what they're warning you against. And slowly but surely, folks, have you noticed? Have you noticed that it's kind of already happening? Now, a little recap of the articles we've already gone through. Article 1 through Article 6, basically saying that, all right, we have military bases in every state. That signifies the presence of a hostile army. That signifies martial law. It proclaims the martial law. We also said that no notice to the people has to be given. We also said that that it shall continue in times of peace, unless otherwise ordered by the military authority, which is the commander-in-chief. However, we read from the government that at no time was General Orders number 100 and number 1 ever repealed. We're still standing in a dictatorship. We're still standing in emergency powers, and evidence of that is the authority of the president to have and declare emergency powers. Emergency declarations, and to proclaim executive orders. He couldn't do that without being in a state of peace, which means a war on an emergency. He would not have this power. None of this would be happening if Congress simply took away that power and declared the end to the military occupation of the United States, of America, the 50 states, by Washington, D.C. That's all it is. It's really simple when you think about it. We'll be back, folks.
Think you need guns to stop tyranny? Then what you waiting for? We've already stripped you of your liberty, privacy, civil rights, and dignity. You want some more?
Scientists have been battling to understand what this unappealing object is all about. What the object is all about. Information in the form of energy.
You're in the Corporation Nation.
Simultaneously.
Now, I want to be clear here, since we just read the origins of all of this through Lincoln. Lincoln was no hero, folks, especially for you, as he refers to them, the colored race. The colored race should not in any way worship the existence of a man named Lincoln. Let me tell you why. Let me read you what Lincoln actually thought. You see, you don't hear this in the mainstream because they have to keep up the illusion that the Civil War was actually to end slavery. What a bunch of crap. Let me read you what Lincoln actually said. Now, you'll notice the progression here, and starting in 1958 when tensions were getting hot, but remember the Civil War didn't start till 61, 62. When the orders were declared. So here's Lincoln on slavery. This is what he really, really thought behind the scenes, because remember, the stuff that's given to you in school is not the actual opinions. It's the opinions of the office of the victors of history, not of what the men actually thought. That's why you find that the founding fathers were all heavily against Christianity, because Christianity meant self-government. And they wanted to govern, to control. What did Lincoln say on slavery? Well, he wrote in 1958, I am not, nor have ever been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes. Remember what a Negro is? Negro means some man without rights. That's what Negro actually meant. That's why it's capitalized. I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. There is a physical difference between the white and black races, which I believe will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. Now, good or bad? Well, he was just being a politician. We'll go further and we'll explain. Lincoln in 1980 in his inaugural address. I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the United States, or in the states, where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so. Spoken like a slave owner. Now we're in the midst of the beginnings of the quote-unquote Civil War. Now, here is a letter that he wrote to Horace Greeley on August 22nd, 1862. My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or to destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps save the Union. Okay, that's the real Lincoln. That's the real story of the Civil War. Saving the Union by forcefully killing the people who didn't want to be a part of it lawfully anymore. Nothing to do with slavery. Slavery was just a problem. for politicians. Now, remember who Horace Greeley was? I read a quote by him last Friday, I believe. Let me read it again. Horace Greeley, founder of the New York Tribune. This is what he says, because he acknowledged what actually happened. We have stricken the slave shackles from 4 million human beings and brought all laborers to a common level, not so much by the elevation of former slaves, Negroes, as by particularly reducing the whole working population, white and black, to a condition of serfdom. While boasting of our noble deeds, that the Civil War was to end slavery, laugh out loud. ... exclamation, 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 capitalized, laugh out loud. While boasting of our noble deeds, we are careful to conceal the ugly fact that by an iniquitous money system we have nationalized a system of oppression which, though more refined, is not less cruel than the old system of chattel slavery. That was in response to Lincoln's saying that he doesn't give a crap about ending slavery. He only wants to save the Union. Now, what does he mean when he says that? Well, we've covered this before, too. What does it mean? First of all, what was a colony but a plantation or a company? Which is kind of funny in and of itself. But we covered the word denizen. Remember that? This is where citizen comes from. Denizen, taken from England, is an alien who is made subject by the king's leathers patent. Remember, the first Patent Act was in 1790. That was not to patent ideas as much as it was to patent people or names. In England, an alien who is made a subject by the king's letters patent, holding a middle state between an alien and a natural-born subject. That's all of you, folks, who are citizens. Want proof of that? Well, let's keep reading. He may take land by purchase or device, which an alien cannot, but he cannot take by inheritance. Folks, you don't have inheritance. You have the illusion of inheritance. You have trust law, but your 50% inheritance tax, called the orphan tax, is proof enough of that. A stranger admitted to residence and certain rights in a foreign country. Well, as a state citizen or a citizen of the United States of America, the United States is a foreign country. So you are having residence in the United States, saying that you're a United States citizen when you vote. You're becoming a resident of Washington, D.C. Oh, but wait, I live in the state. No. Well, yeah, you do physically, but your person lives in the United States, Washington, D.C., in a little filing cabinet on a computer bank. That's what it's talking about. Third definition for denizen is very simple. A citizen. The verb form of denizen is to make a denizen, to admit to residence with certain rights and privileges, or to enfranchise. Oh. Well, gee willikers. Now we see what Horace Greeley was talking about when we were put into an inequitous money system and nationalized a system of oppression. We've stricken the slave shackles for 4 million and brought all laborers to a common level, not so much by the elevation of former slaves as by practically reducing the whole working population, white and black, to a condition of serfdom. In other words, everybody was made into a denizen, a citizen. Now, I know some of you out there are going to say, I'm not a citizen. I don't declare this. No. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that real quick. His last quote from Lincoln, May 18th, 1964, well into the Civil War. He says, "You will take possession by military force of the printing establishments of the New York World and Journal of Commerce." So he's using his power to take over the press. And you will prohibit any further publication thereof. Oh, well, isn't that nice? Does that sound like the America you think you live in? You are therefore commanded forthwith to arrest and imprison the editors, proprietors, and publishers of the aforementioned newspapers. This is what he's commanding to his generals. Take over the press who is dissenting against us, telling the world the truth. Yep, that's your true history, folks. Like it or not. So we talked about all the articles. We talked about the fact that military oppression is not doesn't mean martial law. Martial law is not just when the crap hits the fan. Martial law is military authority exercised in accordance with the laws and usages of war. That is what Obama and every president since or before has been doing. Okay, you're in martial law. It's simple as that. Article 5 and a couple of the other articles, Article 6 says very clearly that all civil and penal law shall continue to take its usual course. In other words, the law that was there before and the lawmakers that were there before can continue and pretend that they're doing exactly what they're doing today, legislative, executive, or administrative. Doesn't mean it ceases just because you have a dictator. We'll be back.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. Who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Corporation Nation. I'm Clint, your host, and we're talking again about the Lieber Code. We're continuing our show from Friday, and we have basically reached Article 7. Now, again, I want to say, and I'll be very clear, that the reason that I am, the reason that I have Daniel on the show on Wednesdays, because I've come to realize that all these gurus out there, all these people trying to tell you that there's a process of elimination, there's a process of processing, there's a process of getting out of the system, there's a process. In reality, that is true. But also in reality, there is no getting out from under the black boot of government's army. And again, your sons, daughters, husbands, wives, cousins, uncles. All right, there is no solution for that. That is a problem that will continue to remain as long as the problem keeps being ignored and justified and voted for and all of that. Okay, legitimized at every turn. So again, the presence of a military base is martial law. The law itself is pretended to continue, even though it's not actually. It's just like the Constitution was pretended to continue after the Civil War, or even during the Civil War, when the president took dictatorial powers over the nation. The codes, statutes, the common law, etc., all pretended to continue, but they're all under the order of the federal government, who is occupying those states or countries. So what does Article 7 say? Martial law extends to property and persons, whether they are subjects of the enemy or aliens to that government. Now you see what I mean? Martial law just doesn't extend to you because you are enfranchised into the system as a denized citizen. Just because you claim to be free doesn't mean that you actually are free from this tyranny, from martial law. Okay? Aliens to that government are just as much under the boot of government than citizens are, whether they are subjects of the enemy or aliens to that government. Martial law extends to property and persons. Well, the United States considers this whole kit and caboodle essentially their property. And it considers your property to be their property, whether you registered it or not. So you can pretend. You can pretend, and they're going to let you pretend, because not a lot of people are going to wake up to this and actually understand what property really is, or what natural law really is. Not a lot of people are going to wake up to this. So they're going to let you, just like, pretend that you're free and pretend that you've somehow escaped the system. They don't really mind. Trust me. You're still spending their money for the most part. There's some of you that aren't, I know. You're still participating. This is, you're still there. You're still on their land, what they consider their land, which is the corporation. Land equals corporation. Article 10. And this is why I say to the gurus, just go, peeve off. None of your systems, it might keep you out of jail. It might. Unless the president declares that you should go to jail, and then you're in jail. It's simple as that. So, just like the banks and the country lets you invest in stock. It makes you feel like you're free, that you can participate in the usury of the system. It makes you feel like you're part of it, like you have some semblance of freedom. It lets you, even keep your children, as we discussed last Wednesday. It actually has the beneficent recognition that you are a good citizen and can keep your children to raise them without the state taking them from you. Although, the state does take them whenever they want, because it's their property. Article 10. Martial law affects chiefly the police and collection of public revenue and taxes, whether imposed by the expelled government or by the invader being the United States, and refers mainly to the support and efficiency of the Army, its safety, and the safety of its operations. You see, this is a hard one to comprehend, because really the whole system is set up to support the efficiency of the armies. The airlines, government contracts with the airlines. Whole plane loads are reserved just for soldiers. Your restaurants, how many times do you go to a restaurant, see soldiers in there? Everything is set up to support the Army. Your taxpayer dollars are collected to pay the Army and to be put into its funds. Your taxpayer money is paid for the veterans, for the veterans' hospitals, for all the benefits. Your taxpayer money is is used for weapons, to kill you with, and to harm you, and to maim you. And what you're going to see in the next 10 years is going to astonish you. Dare I talk about the Putin zombie gun, or energy weapons, all of that stuff? I mean, my God, what's coming? You're worried about nuclear weapons? You're way, way behind the game then. Israel is surrounded with little machines that shoot any weapon out of the sky and disable it. That's nuclear war is the most obsolete thing I can think of at this point when it comes to war. We're in fourth generation warfare. Nuclear bombs are what, second generation? I mean, we're so far removed from anything like that. You're not going to see it coming. It's going to come from space. It's going to come from a satellite. I mean, jeez. So, again, martial law affects chiefly the police and collection of public revenue and taxes to support the efficiency of the Army, its safety, and the safety of its operations. Do you ever think of that? Probably not, because we just think this is just normal, all this crazy corporate stuff. No, it's not normal. Nothing's normal about our lifestyle. Article 12. Yeah, I'm skipping a few that are a little less important, but Article 12. Whenever feasible, martial law is carried out in cases of individual offenders by military courts. What are our courts, folks? Sure, they seem like they're just normal courts, but, they're churches. But their actions, their opinions are carried out by military force, whether that be your executive, your governor, your National Guard, your sheriff, your police. Because remember, the whole thing is to support the efficiency of the army, because without the army, without the police, what the heck are these people going to do with their opinions? Nothing. They'd have no force because there'd be no force behind them. What good would law be? What good would their military law be? Martial law, which is what we're under, is carried out in cases of individual offenders by military courts. Why do you have to show up to court? Well, a lot of people say you don't. Well, then why do they come after you when you don't show? Because law is based in force. But sentences of death shall be executed only with the approval of the chief executive, provided the urgency of the case does not require the speedier execution, and then only with the approval of the chief commander. They're talking about the governor, folks. The governor gives pardons. He is the military chief. We'll be back.
Is this real? Or is this just a ride? The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear
Welcome
and
back,
love.
folks.
The world is like a
We're in the
ride.
Corporation Nation. So what is an article anyway? These words. Well, an article, as defined in the 1828 Webster's, is to agree by articles, to stipulate something, to bind by articles of covenant or stipulation. Bondage, in other words, binding. To be articled is to be drawn up in particulars, or accused or bound by articles. If you're a citizen, you are bonded to the Constitution, to the Articles, to the Lieber Code, all of these articles. It's funny, isn't it, when you actually discover what these words actually mean? Why are there articles in the Constitution? Because they mean to bound you, to bind you in something. It's that simple. No great mystery. An article is a single clause in a contract, account, a system of regulations, etc. Binding someone to it. If you're a citizen, you're bound to it. See, unfortunately, when you're talking about war and the articles of war, as we'll read, continuing with the Lieber Code, there's not a lot of exceptions to who can be bound by the rules of war. Because of course, the doctrine of necessity is declared. Now, Article 13 says that, it says military jurisdiction is of two kinds. Oh, okay. Well, let's. What two kinds are military jurisdiction, Mr. Lieber? Well, first, he says, that which is conferred and defined by statute. Second, that which is derived from the common law of war. What do you think common law was? Let me read that again. Military jurisdiction is of two kinds. So the courts are hearing your case in two kinds of courts, both military. In other words, military jurisdiction. What is jurisdiction? The right to declare what the law is, or to interpret the law militarily. First, that which is conferred and defined by statutes. Well, statutes are just military, as we discovered. It's just military rule designed to look like it's normal and fair and balanced, kind of like Fox News. Second, that which is derived from the common law of war. common law. Military rule of war. Military offenses under the statute law must be tried in the manner therein directed. But military offenses which do not come within this the statute must be tried and punished under the common law of war. All right? Oh, no, but I want to be in common law. Oh, well, you're still under military jurisdiction. I don't care what the heck you call your form of law. You know, it's great to know all this stuff. That's why we talk about it all the time, and it can certainly get you out of statutory trouble and common law trouble. But ultimately, again, the problem still exists because you're under military occupation and martial law rule, military rule. The character of the courts which exercise these jurisdictions depends upon the local laws of each particular country. Well, what have they done? They've created uniform commercial code, model corporations acts, all of the uniform acts and codes that they've created that all states have passed, including Common Core and UCC and all the things of Child Protective Services. So, you know, it goes on. In the armies of the United States, the first is exercised by courts martial. In other words, statute course is just a martial law court. That's all it is. While cases which do not come within the rules and articles of war or the jurisdiction conferred by statute on courts martial are tried by military commissions. Oh, okay. So your common law court is simply a military commission. Great. Article 14. Military necessity. Oh, there's the magic word. Military necessity. Remember, necessity means that law does not exist. If something is necessary, necessity knows no law. Okay, this is what everything is based on. This one doctrine, the doctrine of necessity. Because necessity must happen. It is necessary, and therefore law cannot interfere with it. No law, and that includes the rights of men, the natural law, or anything else. Military necessity is understood by modern civilized nations, consists in the necessity of those measures which are indispensable for securing the ends of the war and which are lawful according to the modern law and usages of war. Remember, presidential executive declarations of emergency are claimed from the law of necessity, just as Roosevelt spoke so eloquently to Congress, and Congress said necessarily and speedily should we give the president the power to dictate and declare emergencies. 1933. Again, enforced violently because necessity means violent is okay. Violence is perfectly necessary. And, you know, what this is really saying is that the emergency, the war against the emergency isn't undeclared, which is why Obama and the next president will continue the terrorist emergency order declaration, Okay, because that war will never end. They'll just keep doing statute after statute and make it worse and worse and worse. So the emergency isn't undeclared. The war against the emergency, the terrorists, or the swine flu, right? Another one that he extended. It's necessary to end the war against the emergency, each individual declared emergency. So they're not always talking about a violent fighting when they're talking about war, because remember, according to Black's law, declared war is the same power and authority as a declared emergency. It's a war against the emergency. Article 15, military necessity. Oh, there it goes again. So in other words, the military knows no law. Military necessity admits of all direct destruction. Oh, okay, this is one of my favorite ones. I'm gonna say this again. Military necessity admits of all direct destruction of life or limb of armed enemies. How many of you are armed out there? Huh? Destruction of life and limb of you is okay. Are you not armed? Well, let me continue. Okay? Destruction of life and limb of armed enemies and of other persons whose destruction is incidentally unavoidable. In other words, collateral damage in the armed contests of the war. Did you hear that? Doesn't matter if you have guns or not. That little beam from space gonna get you. The zombie gun is gonna get you. It allows of the capturing of every armed enemy and every enemy of importance to the hostile government. Well, that'd be me. I'm armed with this information, right? I don't have to be armed with a weapon. I don't have to be violent for them to consider me, well, violent, in my words. Or of particular danger to the captor, it allows of all destruction of property and obstruction of the ways and channels of traffic, travel, and communication. Isn't that lovely? That's the rules of war, and we're under them.
Hi, neighbor. Welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Or maybe if I press this button. There are so many things to learn about in this world, and so many people who can help us learn.
All right, welcome back, folks. Corporation Nation. And we're talking about the necessities of war and the fact that basically means that you have not one right among you. That you can be starved, poisoned, chemtrailed, biologically tested upon, blown to smithereens, and injected with all manner and host of disease. And it's perfectly a reasonable thing for those who control the military law. Military necessity. What else does it say? Well, it says, destruction of property. That's fine. Go ahead. Your house is not, your property is not at all sacrosanct at all in any way. And obstruction of the ways and channels of traffic, travel, and communication. And, listen to this, of all withholding of sustenance or means of life from the enemy. Folks, that's your food supply. That's your water supply that they're talking about. You get out of hand. Nowadays, if you were to try to secede, they'd just cut off your water. I mean, they'd cut off your electricity. They'd cut off your credit cards. They'd cut off everything that you think makes you free, but in fact enslaves you because you're completely dependent upon this system that supports you in the time of peacekeeping operations under a declared military rule. Isn't that ironic? How easy it would be to do exactly that, withhold all of our sustenance or means of life because we're the enemy. Goes on, of the appropriation of whatever an enemy's country affords necessary for the subsistence and safety of the army, and of such deception as does not involve the breaking of good faith, either positively pledged regarding agreements entered into during war or supposed by the modern law of war to exist. So we suppose that the law of war exists. Men who take up arms against one another in public war do not cease on this account to be moral beings responsible to one another and to God. What does that mean? It means they're giving people a license to kill immorally and saying it's okay. You don't have to be responsible to God, to the natural law. That's what they're saying because they're pretending to be God, remember? That last sentence is very tricky. Men who take up arms against one another in public war, in other words, war against each other, do not cease on this account to be moral beings. Who says? Who says? Government? The people who claim that they can starve you and your children? They say that you're not responsible to one another? Absolutely not. That you're not responsible to God and the laws of nature? Oh, my God. This is the law of necessity. The law of necessity knows no God, knows no morals or values. Why do you think government knows no morals or values? Because they have license to themselves. Article 16. Isn't this crazy, folks? I mean, this is what you live under, but because you're civil, because you allow it, and you don't notice it also all too much, and it's incrementally creeping up on you, and you see the police state getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where it's getting too late. Article 16. Military necessity. Oh, there it is again. Here's a great one for you. Military necessity does not admit of cruelty. Oh. Well, does that sound like torture? Military necessity means we have to have Abu Ghraib and places like it to torture people for absolutely no reason and who've done nothing? Because military necessity knows no law, and therefore it would never admit of being cruel, no matter how much we torture. Military necessity allows for it through license. Military necessity does not admit of cruelty. That is, the infliction of suffering for the sake of suffering or for revenge. Nor of maiming or wounding except in fight, nor of torture to extort confessions. See what I mean? Here, let me just waterboard you. Yeah, it's illegal, but necessity requires it. It does not admit of the use of poison in any way, nor of the wanton devastation of a district. Well, gee, how do you explain fluoride? Well, it must be that necessity thing. It wouldn't admit it, though. It does, however, admit of deception. Oh, bring in the Talmud. Bring in... Bring in the Noahide. Bring in all the great things that are delivered from Satan. You know, Hebrew Satan just means an adversary. Doesn't mean, remember the Bible's a book of life, not death. The synagogue of Satan means the synagogue of adversaries to men. It admits of deception, but disclaims act of perfidy, and in general, military necessity does not include any act of hostility, which makes the return to peace unnecessarily difficult. Oh, isn't that nice? Article 17. War is not carried on by arms alone. Oh. It is lawful, another one of my favorites here. War is not carried on by arms alone. Why? Well, it's lawful to starve the hostile belligerent, armed or unarmed, so that it leads to the speedier subjection, of the enemy. Have you guys read the enemy of the state, what that is? Do you know that you're all potential at any time could be declared enemies? Anytime. It's already on the books. All it takes is a little bit of necessity, and bang! You're the bad guy. And you can be starved. Armed or unarmed, doesn't matter. How about the way they starved all the white German soldiers and farmers after World War II? That's right, those concentration camps where they put all the good German people who were defending their country. Countless stories of U.S. soldiers admitting that they starved those German people after the war. We were the bad guys. How about through the Holodomor? How about through the Bolshevik Revolution, starving of millions and millions of white Germanic farmers? Dare we call that a Holocaust? Oh, my goodness. Article 18. Well, I guess you could apply Article 17 to the Third World as well. It's okay to starve the Third World and the Middle East. They're belligerent. They actually fight back when we go and take over their countries. Why not? I mean, it's okay. Let's just starve all the African people. Let's starve, it's fine. It's fine. It's necessary. It's lawful. Yeah, lawful. What a word. Of license. God's not going to notice. Article 18. When a commander of a besieged place expels the non-combatants in order to lessen the number of those to consume his stock of provisions, it is lawful, though an extreme measure, to drive them back so as to hasten on the surrender. What does that say? They're just going to come in and take your food. They're going to take your weapons. They're going to take whatever they need as provisions for the army. Because remember, according to the other article, all this is to carry on the good and continuity of the army. It's what all of these things are for. At your expense. Even though you're part of the army. It's so crazy. Ironic. Article 19. Commanders, whenever admissible, inform the enemy of their intention to bombard a place, so that the non-combatants, and especially the women and children, may be removed before the bombardment commences. But it is no infraction of the common law of war to omit, thus to inform the enemy. Surprise may be a necessity. So, why do we not tell our enemies that we're going to bomb their women and children? Well, because it's no infraction of the common law of war to not tell them, to not inform the enemy that we're going to bomb. Who's the enemy? Anyone, everything. We'll be back.
Derivatives, quantitative easing, trade imbalances, recession, low GDP, nations close to collapsing, and subprime loans, foreclosed homes, and people's taxes spent to bail out too big to fail AAA banks again. Fear levels rising as the US crash seems imminent, having smashed the debt ceiling of 14 trillion despite protests and clashes in Athens streets. The IMF imposed structurally unjust programs in Greece, where in fact the term economy entered our language from the Greek oikonomia, meaning household management. Well, how are we managing? Theories abound, but in practice,
we're back.
We actually know what the hell's even happening.
I'm not going to be taking calls today. I'm just going to keep reading until the end here. Article 19. No infraction of the common law of war to admit, thus to inform the enemy, so your women and children are not considerations when it comes to the necessity of law of war. Well, I mean, that makes sense. And also, of course, when it says they don't have to warn you, basically they actually do warn people for the most part. It says wherever admissible, inform the enemy of their intention to bombard a place so that the non-combatants, especially women and children, may be removed before the bombardment. Well, folks, remember when we talked about kind of geoengineering? They tell you. I mean, it's in the law. You can find all the statutes. It's all there. It's all legal, perfectly necessary. Okay. Well, I mean, I just posted not too long ago the warning that was in the Salt Lake Tribune in Utah here that says they're going to be using experimental aircraft to modify the weather. All right. They write it in the National Register when they do biological weapons tests on the people. They tell you. You just don't know where to look. You got to look in the Federal Register. They tell you. Oh, well, they don't really tell you. They actually tell Congress. See, Congress is informed when biological tests are going to. So, because, they are the people. The problem is Congress isn't telling you. Your representatives aren't informing you of the biological testing that is constantly being forced upon you because they are the people. You've attorned your power to them. They're your attorneys. What they tell you and don't tell you, hey, what can you do? No infraction of the common law of war to admit that information. So they're not doing anything wrong by not telling you that your next baby might have two heads. There's nothing wrong. I'm not going to go through the whole code. This will be the end of this. But Section 2 of the Lieber Code deals with, the spoils of war, basically. Property, corporate fiction, persons belong to the occupying force of government. And, of course, it's part of the God trust. You know that little saying on the dollar, "In God we trust"? Well, that's what it all goes into, the government trust under God. God being the vicar. Not the spiritual God. Section 2, public and private property of the enemy. That's you. Protection of persons, and especially of women, of religion, the arts and sciences, punishment of crimes against the inhabitants of hostile countries. Each state is a hostile country. Even in war, they talk about preserving religion, the arts and sciences, and even women and children. Article 31. A victorious army appropriates all public money. Well, gee, isn't that what happened when, in 1933, what happened? Well, we had the Emergency Banking Act, right? Confiscation of gold. We had all that stuff happen. Right around that time, a victorious army appropriates all public money, seizes all public movable property until further direction by its government, and sequesters, sequester, recognize that word? Sequesters for its own benefit or of that of its government all the revenues of real property belonging to the hostile government or nation. Folks, this means that states have no rights. This explains why states are required to invest all of your taxpayer money into foreign, in other words, federal securities. Right? In the CAFR. Go look. There is no states' rights. It's an illusion because states are the hostile government. The title to such real property remains in abeyance during the military occupation and until the conquest is made complete. Public money was gold and silver. Remember? Lawful money. Oh, silly, silly beasts of burden we are. Finally, I'm going to read Article 32. Article 32. A victorious army, by the martial power inherent in the same, may suspend, change, or abolish, as far as the martial power extends, the relations which arise from the services due, according to the existing laws of the invaded country, from one citizen, subject, or native of the same to another. May suspend, change, or abolish, as far as the martial power extends, the relations which arise from the services due. What's that talking about? Well, what do you have as a citizen? You have contractual obligations. And government, in that, as the second part of that contractual obligator or obligatee, is supposed to give you services. So you complain that the president changes the Obamacare Affordable Act Care at any time he wishes? Well, that's because he has the power. As far as the martial power extends of the president, the commander-in-chief of the military, and the marshal, the relations which arise from his services due to you. It's that simple. These phrases aren't that hard to understand once you understand the concept of what a citizen is. It also says native. What's a native? How about the Indians? Do you think the rules of war didn't say we couldn't starve the Indians? No, that was perfectly justified and licensed under God, according to government. Are you you're no longer a citizen? Did you give up your citizenship? Are you just a native of America now? Are you of the United States of America? Or are you just a free man on the land? Well, I'm sorry, but as much as I would love to believe that that actually means something in this day and age, it doesn't. It just doesn't. The commander of the army must leave it to the ultimate treaty of peace to settle the permanency of this change. Well, there is no treaty of peace. So it's going to continue. It's just going to keep. I mean, it's just. Oh, folks, I hope you enjoyed our little ride down martial law lane. I hope I didn't offend your sensibilities. I hope I didn't. Well, I take that back. I hope I did. I hope I crushed your belief system. I hope I crushed your religion of the United States. I hope I crushed the desire to be a part of the cult of the Constitution. Okay, there's no going back to the Constitution. There's no restoring of anything. This is because of the Constitution. Just like it was because of the Constitution, as we heard from Mr. Church, it was because of the Constitution that Hitler was able to invoke Article 48 of that Constitution and take over government with with Congresses or the legislatures. It's because of the state of siege. I think in the French Constitution, it's because of whatever it's called in the English or United Kingdom. And it's going to be that way with the United Nations. And it is that way, certainly. You might want to look up the emergency powers of the European Union. Okay, well, the reason to start the European Union was the same reason to start the United States, the same reason to start the United Nations. It's because you can put these emergency powers, the law of necessity, that doctrine, that religion, it is actually the anti-religion, the anti-God, the anti-morals and values. Okay, they start these unions for exactly this reason. Go look, folks, at the emergency powers of both the United Nations and especially the European Union. You're going to find it's very similar to what we have going on right now. All right, folks, join me tomorrow for Daniel, Christian Remedy and Law. Take care.